working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Joining me today is from our EBC Bangkok Bureau. Hello, Faye.
Hello, I'm Faye Barte from your EBC Thailand Bureau, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic of the ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. Pro-democracy protesters and police clashed in Bangkok as anti-government rallies calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha intensify.
In rain-triggered disasters in Vietnam, more than 100 people have died and 20 others are missing in central Vietnam following weeks of severe flooding and landslides, authorities said Wednesday as the country braced for yet another storm this weekend.
President Joko Widodo and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga agreed to form an essential business travel corridor between the two countries.
There would be, in effect, a lot of the exports of China.
The IMF is predicting the worst economic decline in Asia in generations due to COVID-19 and warning that rising inequality could lead to social unrest in the newly released Asia-Pacific Regional Economic Outlook released today, October 21, in Washington, D.C.
First, pro-democracy protesters and police clashed in Bangkok as anti-government rallies calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha intensify. Take a look. Angry democracy activists marched onto the government house, defying an emergency decree imposed last week, banning gatherings of more than 4 people. Democracy activists had massed at Bangkok's Victory Monument, while counter-rallies attracted thousands of royalists in the southern province of Narathiwat and scores more in the capital. Some minor scuffles broke out between rival factions before thousands of pro-democracy activists set off towards the seat of the executive. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha is accused of rigging the 2019 election in his favor. And protesters are also demanding the powerful and ultra-wealthy monarchy to stay out of politics, a previously taboo subject.
Meanwhile, Thailand's embattled premier announced Wednesday he might leave an emergency decree that has failed to stifle a growing protest movement demanding his resignation and reforms to the monarchy. Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha addressed the nation, saying he would make the first move to de-escalate the situation.
ผมต้องปกป้องประเทศจากพลังมืดที่ไม่ว่าจะมาจากที่ใดก็ตามไม่ให้สร้างความเสียหายให้กับประเทศไทยของเราผมต้องทำให้แน่ใจว่าประเทศไทยยังคงมีความยุติธรรมในสังคมเราได้เห็นการกระทำที่น่าหดหู่ใจอย่างมากที่เกิดขึ้นกับเจ้าที่ตำรวจมีการทุบตีทำร้ายตำรวจด้วยครีมเหล็กขนาดใหญ่และมีพฤติกรรมรุนแรงไม่เหมาะสมอีกหลายอย่างต่อเจ้าหน้าที่นะครับซึ่งเป็นการตั้งใจทำร้ายคนไทยด้วยกันแต่เวลาเดียวกันเราก็เห็นว่ายังมีคนอีกมากมายที่แม้ว่าจะกำลังทำผิดกฎหมายแต่ก็ปฏิบัติตนด้วยความสงบมีเจตนาที่ดีที่ต้องการขอความยุติธรรมให้เกิดขึ้นในสังคมและมีความจริงใจที่อยากจะเห็นประเทศดีขึ้นผมกำลังเตรียมที่จะยกเลิกพรก.สถานการณ์ฉุกเฉินที่มีความร้ายแรงในเขตท้องที่กรุงเทพเร็วๆนี้ยกเว้นหากมีสถานการณ์รุนแรงใดๆเกิดขึ้น
emergency decree was issued after a group of protesters surrounded the Queen's Royal Motorcade, raising their arms in a three-fingered salute of defiance inspired by the Hunger Games movies. On Friday, the use of force escalated as riot police deployed water cannon against the unarmed activists, and scores of demonstrators have been arrested. And yesterday, pro-democracy protesters and police clashed in Bangkok as anti-government rallies calling for the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha intensified.
To Vietnam now, where more than 100 people have died and 20 others are missing in the central part of the country following weeks of severe flooding and landslides, according to authorities, as the country braced for yet another storm this weekend. About 178,000 homes have been submerged by floodwaters, according to the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, with rescuers mounting a desperate bid to get food and aid and drinking water to those cut off. Roads, infrastructure, and crops in the central region have also been devastated by the floods, according to the charity, warning that hundreds of thousands would need housing and income support in the coming weeks. Nguyen Thi Xuan Tu of the Vietnam Red Cross Society said the floods are some of the worst we have seen in decades. At least 111 people have been killed, according to the Disaster Management Authority, while nearly 200,000 have been evacuated. And among those dead are 22 soldiers who were engulfed in a huge landslide on Sunday in Quang Tri Province, and 13 members of a rescue team who had attempted to save workers from a hydropower plant. A search team is still trying to find 15 of the missing plant workers who were also caught up in a landslide. Vietnam is frequently lashed by harsh weather in the rainy season between June and November, and Central Coast provinces are the most affected areas. The General Statistics Office said more than 130 people were reported dead or missing in natural disasters around the country last year.
Cambodia has also suffered badly from flooding in recent weeks. The death toll jumped to 34 on Wednesday, Prime Minister Hun Sen said, with more than 400,000 people affected. The northwestern province of Banteay Minh Chey has experienced its worst flooding in 70 years, he added. The government dispatched hundreds of uniformed army and naval forces with speedboats to help evacuate people from their homes. Floods usually hit Cambodia between August and October. Last year, the disaster agency said Mekong River and flash floods claimed 30 lives as the storms killed 8 people and injured 131 others.
Meanwhile, here in the Philippines, the monetary equivalent of the damage caused by Tropical Storm Pepito to agriculture and infrastructure has reached 121,697,633 pesos, according to the National Disaster Risk and Management Council on Thursday. Mark Kashian Timbal, the NDRRMC spokesperson, said the figures are consolidated from Regions 2, which is Cagayan Valley, 3, Central Luzon, and 4A, Calabarzon. This can be broken into 92,457,633 pesos for agriculture and 29,240,000 pesos for infrastructure. Infrastructure damage are mostly school facilities, according to Mr. Timbal.
Meanwhile, families affected by Tropical Storm Pepito are now placed at 5,555 families, or equivalent to 25,268 persons residing in Regions 2, 3, and Regions 4A. And the trough of severe tropical storm Pepito will bring scattered rain showers and thunderstorms over parts of Luzon and Western Visayas, the Weather Bureau said on Thursday. In Luzon, this will prevail in Batanes, the Babuyan Islands, the Ilocos region, the Cordillera Administrative Region, Zambales, Bataan, Occidental Mindoro, and Palawan. Partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers will be experienced over Metro Manila and the rest of the country due to localized thunderstorms. Pag-asa earlier announced that Pepito will likely exit the Philippine area of responsibility on Thursday. Meanwhile, moderate to strong winds and moderate to rough seas will prevail over northern Luzon, central Luzon, and the western section of southern Luzon. Elsewhere, winds will be light to moderate with slight to moderate seas.
In an interview with government-run PTV4's Laging Handa Assistant Secretary Casiano Monilla, OCD Deputy Administrator for Operations, said that according to Pag-asa, the country is expected to experience 5 to 8 typhoons, 1 or 2 of which are likely to be devastating before the end of the year. The NDRRMC has also taken steps to rebuild the regions and help them prepare in the event of a strong typhoon. Take a look.
Kagaya ng for the past months, sinasabi na yan sa atin ng Pag-asa na pumapasok na tayo sa sa panahon kung saan nag-intensify yung sa kanilang sinasabi na La Nina. That's why yung ating pong mga bagyo sa taon na ito ay medyo may kalakasan ng mga pag-ulan. And historically, ito rin yung mga buwan pagdating natin ng fourth quarter ay dito po ang kadamihan ng ating bagyo. That's why we are saying through the estimate ng Pag-asa na we will be experiencing around 5 to 8 typhoons pa na darating sa atin, of which baka mga dalawa nito ay malakas. Opo. Epekto na rin ng climate change. Napansin na natin ito for the past several years na may mga bagyong pumapasok na napakalakas. Ang datos po natin, ginagamit ay yung datos din na binibigay sa atin ng Pag-asa. And ang NDRMC po ay nakailang beses na nagpulong. Actually, before the typhoon Pepito, yung Typhoon Opel, ay nagkaroon na rin tayo ng pag-review sa mga regions na naapektuhan ito palagi for them to look into yung mga areas kung saan malimit na bahain. Tingnan na rin nila yung kanilang mga contingency plans para immediately ma-evacuate natin ang ating kababayan kung ito ay threatened ng landslide o sakaling man ay pagbaha.
The Office of Civil Defense said more than 5,000 families living in 3 provinces of Region T or Region 2 and Region 4A were affected by the inclement weather caused by the onslaught of Tropical Storm Pepito. 171 families from Cagayan were affected, 168 in Isabela and 3 in Quirino, all in Region 2. Monilla added that the majority of the affected families were the ones evacuated preemptively by their disaster risk reduction management units. All of them are now safe. Meanwhile, OCD Administrator Ricardo Jalad said that he has directed all regional directors in the affected areas to look into families displaced by Pepito to determine whether the local government units are capable of helping them or need assistance from the national government.
Digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business every Saturday from 5 to 6 p.m. Open for Business, from vision to action.
Turuan din natin ang mga bata ng tamang paghugas ng mga kamay. Basain ang kamay ng tubig at lagyan ng sabon. Kuskusin ang iyong mga palad. Gayon din ang pagitan ng mga daliri. Pati na ang likod ng mga palad at daliri. Ganon din ang iyong hinalaki, kasama ang mga dulo ng iyong mga daliri. Pagkatapos ay iyong palapulsuhan. Gawin ito ng kahit 20 segundo. Pagkatapos ay banlawan ng tubig at patuyuin.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, the COVID-19 cases in the Philippines surged to 362,243 after 1,509 newly confirmed infections were logged on Wednesday. Of the confirmed cases, 43,990, 12.1% are active cases, 311,506 or 86.0% have recovered, and 6,747 or 1.9% have died. There were 911 recoveries and 60 deaths recorded as of 4 p.m. of October 21. The DOH said that top regions with cases in the recent 2 weeks were National Capital Region, or the NCR, with 320 or 24%, Region 4A 297 or 22%, and Region 6 129 or 10%. This brings the total number of recoveries to 311,506. The DOH said that of the 42,191 active cases recorded on October 19, majority of the patients exhibited mild symptoms, 35,041 or 83.1%, while 1,501 patients are in a critical condition, 3.6%. Meanwhile, the utilization of hospital beds for COVID-19 patients remained relatively stable in the past weeks. DOH data show that 41% or 9,037 beds are occupied out of 21,869 as of October 19. For intensive critical unit or the ICU beds, 48% or 894 beds out of 1,879 are occupied. 35% or 2,298 out of 6,512 ward beds are currently being used, and 43%, 5,845 isolation beds occupied out of 13,478. The number of confirmed severe and critical cases may not necessarily correspond to occupancy of ICU beds and mechanical ventilators, as suspect and probable cases in severe or critical condition also utilize these resources, the DOH said.
One imported case of COVID-19 was confirmed Thursday morning, raising the patient tally to 1,145, according to Vietnam's National Steering Committee for COVID-19 Prevention and Control. According to news.chinpu.vn, a government website of Vietnam, patient 1145 is a 29-year-old man who returned from Angola. He was quarantined upon arrival at Van Don Airport in the northern province of Quang Ni on October 20. He was admitted to Bac Ninh General Hospital yesterday after his sample test showed that he is positive for SARS-CoV-2. As of 6 a.m. on October 22, Vietnam had recorded 691 local community cases. The country has gone 50 days without community infections. Up to 1,406 out of 1,145 COVID-19 patients have been recovered and exited hospitals. The fatalities stand at 35. Nearly 14,000 people who had close contact with COVID-19 patients or came from pandemic-hit areas are now under health surveillance nationwide, including 149 at hospitals, 12,000 others at centralized quarantine camps, and the rest at places of residence.
Thailand has welcomed its first group of tourists in 7 months as part of an experiment aimed at testing if a wider opening is possible as the coronavirus cripples the kingdom's economy. A plane load of 39 Chinese tourists flew into Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi Airport Tuesday evening from Shanghai to a welcome from staff in full protective equipment. The visitors underwent health checks and had their luggage disinfected before donning protective clothing themselves and being whisked away for 2 weeks quarantine. The holidaymakers have come under a special tourist visa scheme which offers 1,200 spots and allows people to stay for up to 9 months. A second group of 147 Chinese tourists from Guangzhou is due to arrive in Thailand next week, followed by a flight from Scandinavia in November. The pandemic has brought the Southeast Asian nation's economy to its knees, with 8 million expected to lose their jobs by the end of the year. Many of those losses will be in the tourism sector in a country that saw 40 million international arrivals in 2019.
President Joko Widodo and Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga agreed to form an essential business travel corridor between their two countries. Now, this is under the Indonesia-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, or EJEPA scheme. Prime Minister Suga said this relaxation will apply for caregivers and nurses. Indonesia currently has similar deals with China, South Korea, United Arab Emirates, and Singapore. President Widodo also appreciated how Japan has been helping ASEAN countries curb the pandemic. Meanwhile, Japan has agreed on a 50 billion yen or $473 million loan for COVID-19 mitigation in Indonesia. President Widodo named Japan as one of the country's strategic economic partners, especially with Japanese companies seeking to relocate to Indonesia. At the meeting, the president discussed the issues on import licenses for agricultural, forestry, and fisheries products from Indonesia. He also hoped Japan could join the Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund, an entity aimed to attract investments which will be established under the Job Creation Bill. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Suga also said Japan agreed to foster cooperation in infrastructure projects, and that includes the Mass Rapid Transit, the Jakarta-Surabaya Rail Project, the Patimban Port, and the development in the outer islands.
U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper revealed a fresh drive to strengthen U.S. alliances with like-minded democracies, in part through arms sales in an effort to curb the global influence of Russia and China. Esper said the Pentagon would systematically monitor and manage its relationships with partner countries, aiming to find ways to coordinate militaries and also to advance as arms sales. The initiative, called the Guidance for Development for Alliances and Partnerships, or the GDAP, comes just 2 weeks before the presidential election that, if President Donald Trump loses, could see ESPER replaced in January. It also came after nearly 4 years of Trump's efforts to restructure and even dismantle alliances, including threatening NATO. He said China uses coercion and financial entrapment to build its alliances with weak countries such as Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said he would raise concerns about China next week as he travels to India, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and Indonesia. Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark Esper will be visiting New Delhi early next week for a dialogue with their colleagues from India, whose relationship with China has sharply deteriorated this year over a deadly border clash. Mr. Pompeo said he would afterwards visit Sri Lanka, Maldives, and Indonesia. Again, let's listen in.
Advancing here at the State Department, we're cooperating with our partners and allies and friends across the world in unprecedented ways. It's been a hallmark of the administration that, frankly, deserves more attention. Look, it starts with working to go out and meet with these people. This Sunday I'll depart for India, for Sri Lanka, for the Maldives, and then on to Indonesia. On every stop, I will discuss a broad range of bilateral topics, but also work to find out with each of those countries the best ways that we can make sure that we cooperate to preserve a free and open Indo-Pacific. I'm especially looking forward to doing that with Secretary Esper in our 2+2 ministerial dialogue with our Indian friends. It's been postponed because of the virus. I'm glad we're going to be able to execute that in person here in just a few days. I'm sure that my meetings will also include discussions on how free nations can work together to thwart threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party. And on that front, good news, this Friday, the EU High Representative Joseph Borrell and I will launch the U.S.-EU dialogue on China. I'm confident that the discussion will deepen our long-term engagement with EU friends on this important issue. For instance, Europeans are concerned, too, about the environment, just as we are. Just this week, the CCP issued a fact sheet that was, fact sheets in quotes, a fact sheet trying to divert attention away from its own horrific environmental record. Let me give you a few real data points. The PRC is the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases, bar none, number one. The PRC is indeed responsible for an estimated 30% of plastic pollution on the world's oceans, more than any other country. The PRC is the world's largest consumer of illegal wildlife and timber products. Again, number one. The PRC flagged our own vessels constantly fish illegally or overfish in waters under the jurisdiction of other coastal states, in particular in Africa, Asia, and in South America. We're pushing back on the Chinese Communist propaganda efforts here at home, too. Today, I'm announcing the State Department is designating the U.S. operations of 6 China-based media companies as foreign missions. They are all substantially owned or effectively controlled by a foreign government. We're not placing any restrictions on what these outlets can publish in the United States. We simply want to ensure that American people, consumers of information, can differentiate between news written by a free press and propaganda distributed by the Chinese Communist Party itself.
A former top fundraiser for President Donald Trump pleaded guilty Tuesday to illegally lobbying the U.S. government to drop its probe into the Malaysia 1MDB corruption scandal and to deport an exiled Chinese billionaire. Elio Brody, 63, was charged in early October with 1 count of conspiracy to act as an unregistered foreign agent after allegedly agreeing to take millions of dollars to lobby the Trump administration. At the time, Brody was National Deputy Finance Chairman of the Republican National Committee after having been a major fundraiser for Trump's successful 2016 presidential campaign. The indictment said Brody was recruited in 2017 by an unnamed foreign national understood to be Malaysian low-tech Joe to pressure as U.S. officials to end their investigation of a scandal engulfing then Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak. The scandal involved the theft of over $4.5 billion from State Investment Fund 1MDB, and Low was allegedly central to moving and hiding some of the stolen funds. The lobbying included trying to arrange for Razak and Trump to play golf together in September 2017 to give the Malaysia leader a chance to pressure Trump to end the U.S. probe. Brody faces a maximum of 5 years in prison and is forfeiting $6.6 million he earned from Low for the lobbying. The golf game never happened, and Low was indicted in 2018 for his alleged role in siphoning off billions from 1MDB. Low, who has also been charged in Malaysia over this scandal, has consistently denied any wrongdoing. His current whereabouts are unknown. In addition, in May 2017, Low introduced Brody to a senior Chinese security official, and they discussed Beijing's desire that Washington deport an exiled Chinese tycoon known to be Guo Weigu, a prominent dissident businessman.
The International Monetary Fund is predicting the worst economic decline in Asia in generations due to COVID-19 and warning that rising inequality could lead to social unrest in the newly released Asia-Pacific Regional Economic Outlook in Washington, D.C. Take a look.
The Asia-Pacific region has been hit hard by the pandemic. You've seen our projections with regional growth at minus 2.2%. 2020 will be remembered as the most severe contraction in generations. Inequality in Asia had been rising even before the crisis, and the pandemic is hitting those at the bottom even harder than the rest. The limited reach of social safety nets and large size of informal sectors is proving to be a roadblock to supporting the most vulnerable at this critical time. Robotization, which is already well advanced in Asia, may displace even more lower-skilled workers going forward. The resulting higher levels of inequality could even lead to social unrest, itself an obvious impediment to sustained economic growth. For 2021, our projection of 6.9% growth is slightly stronger than we had in June. But in combination with the deep recessions this year, it nevertheless implies that a number of economies will still be smaller at the end of 2021 than before the pandemic. Economic scarring seems a near certainty at this point. Our projections suggest that potential output by the middle of this decade could be some 5% lower than before the pandemic, due to the fall in labor force participation and weak confidence that dims private investment.
China has been a bright spot of growth, and Austria praised the government's quick and decisive measures put in place to stem the impact of the virus, followed by testing and contact tracing measures to prevent flare-ups. He also praised Vietnam and Japan for their efforts, but China's current growth may be temporarily robust, and it should use the current time to rebalance its economy to encourage more domestic consumption. Again, let's listen in.
There would be an effect. A lot of the exports of China, however, are very specifically related to medical equipment and home electronics, the things that are really being used by the world as a whole during the pandemic. And you know, the half-life of these exports is probably pretty short. The demand for lots of medical equipment and lots of home electronics will eventually peter out.
says the best defense is still containment.
We are in uncharted territory.
Thailand volume 450. FI mo to 100%. Traffic ban. Construction eh.
The Secretariat hosted the 4th Forum of Entities Associated with ASEAN. This annual forum provides a platform for the ASEAN-accredited entities to bolster further cooperation with ASEAN Secretariat, ASEAN sectorial bodies, and ASEAN-related centers and among themselves. About 150 participants representing ASEAN parliamentarians, judiciaries, youth, civil societies, women, and business and professional associations attended this year's forum, which took place online due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In his welcome remarks, Secretary General of ASEAN Dato Lim Jok Hoi encouraged the entities to explore collaboration with one another as it would assist the early realization of the Asian Community Vision 2025. He said on its part, the ASEAN Secretariat, as always, will work with you, the entities and stakeholders to further strengthen the ASEAN image and brand. Vietnam's permanent representative to ASEAN Ambassador Tran Duc Binh, in his role as chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives to ASEAN, shared his appreciation for entities, contributions to raise ASEAN awareness and foster community building. I hope this 4th Entities Forum will provide a platform to explore further cooperation, and he included. The forum kicked off with an overview of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in ASEAN and ASEAN's responses to date, in particular, how ASEAN member states are working closely together for a post-pandemic recovery framework. The ASEAN entities acknowledge that the journey to recovery requires closer cooperation between various partners and stakeholders.
Meanwhile, ASEAN and Switzerland reaffirmed their commitment to further strengthen their cooperation at the 5th meeting of the ASEAN-Switzerland Joint Sectoral Cooperation Committee. This was held via video conference last October 16. The meeting noted with satisfaction the progress made in cooperation since their partnership began 4 years ago. Both sides discussed the completed, ongoing, and planned projects in implementing the practical cooperation areas for ASEAN-Switzerland Sectoral Dialogue Partnership 2017 to 2021. They also explored opportunities to further deepen cooperation in the areas of connectivity, smart cities, digital innovation, disaster management and humanitarian assistance, and biodiversity conservation and management. Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for ASEAN Political Security, Wang Antoine, and Assistant State Secretary for Asia Pacific of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation, Rafael Nageli, co-chaired the meeting. Members of the Committee of the Permanent Representatives to ASEAN and the Ambassador of Switzerland to ASEAN, Kurt Kunz, were in attendance. And finally, in our news, members of the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, this is in Hawaii, recently held a drive-through food distribution drive-in partnership with the nonprofit Aloha Harvest. Two of the state's well-known people observed the event and urged other groups to also help those in need. Alfred Asenas reports.
I am impressed by how efficient this operation is. There are so many helping hands. What I really like about this is the fact that the Church of Christ, Iglesia ni Cristo, has taken what we know is an issue and a problem into their own hands and partnered with a very good organization like Aloha Harvest. And from what I gathered, you've also tried to get more resources from your own members. This is a testament where sometimes we cannot wait for government.
State Senator Misa Lucha and local celebrity Augie T share their impressions on a recent Aid to Humanity drive-through food distribution sponsored by members of the Iglesia ni Cristo or Church of Christ in Hawaii.
You know, during COVID-19, we've seen the good side and the bad side in people, and this is one of those good sides that not only do good things for our community, but really, you know, the heart of Christian is to serve and give back. These people here at the church is doing exactly that, and which is what we want to do. In order to bring back confidence in the community, we need to honestly serve and be empathetic to our community. So this is awesome.
We know we see a problem. You guys rolled up your sleeves and took the ball and ran with it. And I'm trying to solve an issue in our community, which is, of course, the fact that a lot of our people are unemployed. So neighbors helping neighbors. It is a great demonstration of your charity, of what your core values are. Initiatives like this really alleviate the pain and suffering of our unemployed. So whether we're opening tomorrow or whether in 2 weeks, I think it's beside the point because in the interim, our people need help. And organizations like Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo really should be commended for having you folks do your part, doing your fair share of helping the needy, helping our economically disadvantaged families.
They also believe that relief projects like these offer much-needed boost and motivation to residents as the Aloha State slowly reopens its economy.
We used to have the lowest unemployment rate in the country, and now we have one of the highest with almost 30%. So that is really a sad state of event, right? And of course, a lot of it is because of the fact that we have tourism as our economic driver, and tourism has dried up.
I mean, now is the time, right? We're seeing a great reset. A lot of people, especially in our community here in Eva, Waipahu, and Minilani, we have the largest unemployment. That means a lot of people are either making ends meet or really having a hard time putting food on the table. So if you have the ability to do this and give back to your community, what a way to show a serving heart and be Christ-like, yeah?
Both Misa Lucha and Augie T even offered some words of encouragement to other groups and communities that may have the capacity to help others in need and to emulate the global church's recent efforts.
I would like to encourage them or challenge them even to be able to step up, just like how Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo did, to be able to bring the resources together, get people who are of like minds, reach out to potential community partners so that you can solve an issue that is before us. We have a lot of economically affected families who are impacted by COVID. And I hope that you will find it in your hearts to give, find it in your hearts to be able to share whatever resources that we have. You know, when you look at our community suffering, you cannot help but step up. So hopefully, for those of us who are out there listening, let's do our fair share to support our community, to be able to alleviate the pain and suffering that our families are going through.
This drive-through is just one of several events already scheduled for this month of October alone by the members of the INC here in Hawaii. Reporting from Eva Beach, I'm Alfred Acenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you.
Thanks, Alfred, and thanks, Faye, for joining me today and helping me out again. Thank you so much. Okay, Faye, thank you so much for joining us today. That is the latest news in the ASEAN region. I'm Alma Angeles. Faye and I are saying we live in interesting times. See you back tomorrow.
Hey there, Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle.